I was an army officer who thought I had the perfect marriage until I returned home early from duty one night and found my wife laughing in the arms of another man, a man I thought was a friend. And in that single moment, my world shattered, my heart burned, and my honor was dragged through the mud. So I did something that made me stand trial for murder. You'd think after 9 months in a war zone, the sound of your own heartbeat wouldn't rattle you. But mine was pounding so loud in my ears, it drowned out the hum of the rental car engine as I drove through my quiet suburban neighborhood in Arlington, Virginia. The military had granted me an early leave, classified reasons. Nothing I could tell my wife about over our sporadic calls. She thought I'd be home in 2 weeks. The plan was to surprise her. Hell, I'd been counting down to that moment for months. I pictured her face lighting up, the way she used to leap into my arms like something out of a damn movie. My name's Ethan Brooks, 34 years old, U.S. Army captain. I've seen combat in the Middle East, I've lost brothers in arms, and I've stared down situations most people couldn't even imagine. But nothing prepared me for what I was about to walk into. It was a little after 9 when I pulled up in front of our house. Porch light was on. I remember thinking that was odd. Taylor, my wife, never left it on that early. She liked the cozy, dim look inside the house when she was relaxing at night. I grabbed my duffel from the trunk and crept up the front steps. I wasn't exactly quiet. Boots on wood have a certain weight to them, but I was sure the sound would bring her running. Instead, I heard laughter. Not hers alone, hers mixed with a man's voice. At first, my brain reached for the innocent explanation. Maybe it was her brother visiting. Maybe a neighbor had dropped by. But then I recognized it. That voice, low, confident, with a little rasp from too many cigars. Mark Daniels. I froze with my hand on the door handle. Mark wasn't just a friend. He'd been my best man at our wedding 6 years ago. We'd met back in ROTC, trained together, and although he'd left the army early, we stayed close. I trusted him enough to ask him to look out for Taylor while I was overseas. The laughter came again, hers, bright and intimate. I stepped inside, the door creaking just enough for their heads to turn. Taylor was on the couch in one of my old army t-shirts, legs draped over Mark's lap, her hand resting on his chest like it belonged there. For a second, none of us moved. It was like a still frame. I saw her eyes widen, Mark's mouth twitch like he was searching for an excuse, and I felt the air in the room thicken until I could barely breathe. "Ethan?" she stammered. I dropped my duffel on the floor. What the hell is going on here? Mark had the audacity to smirk a half smile I'd seen him use on women at bars when he was about to close the deal. "Man, it's not what it looks like." "Don't." My voice came out so low I almost didn't recognize it. Taylor scrambled off the couch. "It's not, I was lonely. You were gone for so long, and Mark was just there." Just there. My chest was burning now. "In my house? In my shirt with your hands all over each other?" Mark stood up, all 6'2" of him, trying to play the calm, rational guy. "Ethan, you're tired. You've been through a lot. Don't you dare talk to me like I'm unstable." I took a step forward. "You were supposed to be my friend. You were supposed to have my back, not my wife." Taylor was crying now, but it wasn't the guilt kind. It was the kind where she wanted me to calm down so she didn't look bad. "Please, just sit down. Let's talk about this." I wish I could say I thought things through in that moment, but combat teaches you that hesitation can get you killed. And while this wasn't a firefight, it sure as hell felt like my life was under attack. Mark made the mistake of putting his hand on my shoulder like he was going to guide me away. That was the last straw. I swung, fist to jaw. He stumbled back into the coffee table, knocking over a half-empty wine bottle. Taylor screamed. He came at me then, faster than I expected. We grappled, furniture crashing around us. Somewhere in the chaos, my hand found the heavy crystal vase on the end table, the one Taylor's mother gave us as a wedding gift. I didn't think, I just swung. The vase connected with a sickening crack. Mark went down, clutching the side of his head. Blood seeped through his fingers. Everything after that blurred. I remember Taylor yelling something about calling 911. I remember kneeling there, breathing like I'd just run a mile in full gear, staring at the man I used to trust more than anyone outside my unit. By the time the cops arrived, Mark was conscious, but dazed. They cuffed me right there in my living room, while Taylor sobbed to the officers about how I'd lost control. The ride to the station felt longer than my last deployment. In the interrogation room, they asked me to explain what happened. I told them the truth, or at least my version of it. Did I mean to kill him? No. But did I mean to hurt him? In that moment, yeah, I did. They booked me on attempted murder and aggravated assault. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my life defending my country's honor, and now I was sitting in a cell, my own honor in shreds. That night, as I lay on the thin mattress in the holding cell, staring at the ceiling, I kept hearing Taylor's laugh. That soft, intimate laugh I thought was mine alone. And every time it echoed in my head, I felt the same burn in my chest. But underneath it all, there was something else. A resolve. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about justice, whatever that meant now. Jail is loud in a way you don't expect. Not the shouting or the occasional scuffle I'd been around that in the army. It's the constant hum of tension. The way every footstep echoes. Every cough seems to have an edge to it. People watch you here, measure you, decide if you're prey or not. My first nights in the holding cell had been bad, but the transfer to county jail was worse. A couple of the guys recognized me from the news army captain charged in violent assault on friend. I could feel the judgment in their stares. Some nodded respectfully, others smirked like they already knew I'd lose. On the third day, I got a visitor. Daniel Harper, a military buddy who'd been with me through 2 deployments, walked in wearing a leather jacket and the same steady look he'd always had. He didn't say hello, just sat down across from me, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "Tell me it's not true," he said. I told him everything. The surprise trip home, the laughter, Mark, the fight. Daniel didn't flinch, he just listened. When I was done, he leaned back in his chair. "You're screwed, man, but I get it." He told me about a lawyer, Rebecca Miles, ex-JAG Corps, now a civilian defense attorney with a reputation for tearing apart weak prosecutions. He'd already reached out to her. When Rebecca came to see me the next day, I could tell she was sizing me up. She had sharp eyes, the kind that didn't waste movement. "I read the report," she said. "They're going to paint you as a violent soldier who snapped. The prosecution loves that angle. It's simple, it's emotional, and juries eat it up." I told her I wasn't a violent man. She didn't smile. "Doesn't matter. They don't know you. They know headlines." We went over the charges, the potential sentence if I lost. 20 years? My stomach sank. "Here's the good news," she said. "Mark lived. That takes the heat off a full murder charge. But attempted murder is still serious. We're going to have to frame this as a crime of passion, provocation, betrayal, the whole picture. It's the only way you don't spend the next 2 decades in a cell." The weeks before the trial crawled by. From my cell, I wrote out everything I could remember about that night. About my history with Mark, about my marriage to Taylor. Rebecca wanted the jury to see the man I was before that night. The soldier, the husband, the friend. Some nights, I'd lie awake replaying every decision I'd made since stepping off that plane. If I'd waited until the scheduled return date, would I still have a marriage? Would Mark still be alive and well, just secretly betraying me? The morning of the trial, Rebecca handed me a suit. "You're not walking in there in a uniform. The jury needs to see you as a civilian, a man, not a soldier stereotype." Courtrooms smelled like old wood and stale coffee. The jury sat there, impassive, as the prosecution opened with their version. Decorated soldier returns home. Fueled by jealousy and rage, beats a man nearly to death. They didn't linger on the affair. They barely mentioned it. They wanted me to look like a ticking time bomb. Rebecca's opening was the opposite. She painted the picture of a loyal husband, blindsided by betrayal from not just his wife, but his closest friend. "Ethan Brooks is not a criminal," she told them. "He's a man who came home from serving his country, only to find his life in ruins. And in that moment, he reacted like any human being would when their world collapses." Mark testified first. He came in with a bandage still visible along his hairline. He told the jury he'd been trying to calm me down when I attacked him. Rebecca tore into him on cross-examination, forcing him to admit he'd been involved with my wife for months and had been in my home that night. Taylor's testimony was worse. She cried on cue. She said she'd made a mistake, but that I'd lost control and looked like I wanted to kill Mark. I could see the jurors shift in their seats. Rebecca put me on the stand. "We'd rehearse, but nothing prepares you for the way the prosecutor looks at you like you're already guilty." I told them about my marriage, about Mark's friendship, about the shock of that night. I didn't shy away from admitting I'd hit him, but I made it clear I hadn't intended to kill him. By the time closing arguments came, the room felt heavy. Rebecca hammered home the betrayal, the emotional state I'd been in, the lack of premeditation. The prosecution kept circling back to violence and danger to the community. The judge said deliberations would begin the next morning, which meant I was going back to my cell. As I was let out, Rebecca caught my arm. "Listen to me. Whatever happens tomorrow, this isn't over. This is just the first trial. We'll keep fighting." That night in my cell, I stared at the ceiling again, just like that first night. The difference now was I knew the fight wasn't just about clearing my name. It was about making sure the truth, the whole truth, came out. The next morning, they brought me back into the courtroom. The jury filed in, but instead of a verdict, the foreman handed the judge a note. The judge read it, then looked up. We are unable to reach a unanimous decision at this time. A mistrial. The case was still alive. I wasn't free. I wasn't guilty. I was in limbo. And in that limbo, I made myself a promise. If it took every last ounce of fight I had left from my years in uniform, I was going to win, not just for me, but for every soldier who's ever come home to a battlefield they never expected. Update 1. When the judge called the mistrial, it was like someone had pulled the pin on a grenade, but instead of shrapnel, it was camera flashes and microphones exploding in my face. The court officers barely got me past the swarm of reporters. I kept my eyes down, just like Rebecca told me, but I couldn't avoid hearing the questions. Captain Brooks, do you regret your actions that night? Did you plan the attack? Have you spoken to your wife since the incident? Rebecca pushed through them like she'd been doing it her whole life. No comment. No comment. My client has no comment at this time. Once we were clear, she leaned in and said quietly, "Don't look at social media tonight. And for God's sake, don't answer your phone unless it's me or Daniel." Of course, I didn't listen. The first time I typed my name into the search bar, I half expected a tidal wave of hate. But what I found surprised me. Good for him. That so-called friend got what was coming. Cheating is emotional murder. He defended himself. I'd have done worse if I walked in on that. Thousands of comments, most siding with me. Memes started popping up, pictures of soldiers with captions like, "Don't betray someone who's trained to kill." Crude, sure, but the sentiment was clear. It wasn't just internet strangers. Old army buddies I hadn't spoken to in years were messaging me. People I didn't even remember from my hometown were reaching out. A woman from Texas messaged, "My husband served with honor too. You don't deserve this. We're praying for you." The story had struck a nerve. The media wasn't consistent. Some networks painted me as a decorated hero facing unfair charges. Others said I was a dangerous man whose military background made him prone to violence. But the difference now was that the positive voices were louder. Rebecca noticed it too. The next time we met, she had a folder in her hand. "These are letters sent to the judge's office. People from all over the country writing about your service record, your character, your leadership. This kind of public support can influence how the court perceives you." Daniel smirked from across the table. "You're a damn folk hero now. You could probably run for office." I wasn't so sure about that. Public support didn't erase the fact that the case was still active. Another trial was coming. The prosecution had already filed for it. But it did change something important. The judge's demeanor. At the first hearing after the mistrial, Judge Thompson wasn't as cold as before. He greeted Rebecca respectfully, even asked how I was holding up. It wasn't much, but when you've been treated like a criminal for months, even a little warmth feels like sunlight through a storm. Taylor's reaction to all this? That was a whole different battlefield. She'd gone quiet during the trial. No interviews, no public statements. But after the mistrial, she showed up at my parents' house, the same house I was staying at under court restrictions. My mom opened the door and I could hear Taylor's voice before I even saw her. "Ethan, can we talk?" I stepped into the doorway, blocking her view of the living room. She looked different, not broken, but wary, like she was calculating every word. "You've got the whole internet thinking you're some kind of hero," she said. "Do you even realize what they're saying about me?" I didn't blink. "You mean the truth?" Her jaw tightened. "It wasn't that simple. You were gone all the time. Mark was there. I didn't mean for it to happen this way." I laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "You didn't mean for me to come home early, you mean?" She crossed her arms. "The world doesn't know the whole story. And when the next trial comes, they're going to see you for what you did." Rebecca's voice echoed in my head. Don't engage, don't give them ammunition. So I just stepped back and closed the door. The thing was, Taylor was wrong about one thing. The world was seeing the whole story now. Every podcast, every news panel, every social media thread was picking apart not just the fight, but the betrayal that caused it. Rebecca said public opinion wasn't evidence, but it could shape the atmosphere around the trial. If jurors came in already seeing me as a wronged party, that mattered. By the end of the month, even the judge couldn't ignore it. At a pre-trial motion hearing, Thompson listened to the prosecution's push for stricter bail conditions, then shook his head. "Given the public support and the absence of any further incidents, I see no reason to modify the current release terms," he said. It was subtle, but Rebecca caught my eye and gave the smallest nod. The message was clear. The tide was turning. The case wasn't over. Another trial loomed, and the prosecution would come harder this time. But for the first time since that night, I didn't feel like I was walking into a fight alone. The country was watching, and whether they called me a hero or a criminal, they weren't looking away. And neither was I. Update 2. It had been 9 months since the night I came home early from deployment. 9 months of court dates, strategy meetings, sleepless nights, and holding my breath every time I stepped into a courtroom. When the second trial started, I could feel the difference immediately. The energy was different, calmer, almost like everyone already knew how it would end. Rebecca had spent weeks prepping me, but she was more confident this time. The prosecution burned through their best ammo in the first trial, she told me. They're not coming in with a new story. We're just better at telling the truth than they are at spinning it. And she was right. This time, when I took the stand, I didn't feel like a man defending himself. I felt like someone telling his side for the last time. I spoke about my service, about my loyalty to my wife, about the betrayal. I owned my actions that night, but I also made it clear that I'd been pushed to the edge by two people I trusted most. The public pressure hadn't gone away either. In fact, it had grown. Outside the courthouse, people were holding signs that read, "Justice for Ethan and betrayal is the real crime." Some of them were veterans. Some were just locals who'd followed the story. Every time I walked in or out, someone would shake my hand or tell me to hang in there. Taylor didn't testify this time. Mark didn't either. Apparently, their own lawyers had advised them against it after Rebecca shredded their credibility in the first trial. The prosecution still tried to paint me as a violent man, but without them on the stand, it was like shadowboxing. 2 weeks in, it was time for closing arguments. Rebecca's was short, deliberate. "You've heard the evidence, you've seen the betrayal, you've seen the human reaction of a man pushed to the breaking point. This is not attempted murder. This is not a criminal. This is a man who deserves to walk out of here and rebuild his life." The jury deliberated for 5 hours. 5 hours of pacing, bad coffee, and staring at the same spot on the wall. Then the bailiff came in. "We have a verdict." When the foreman read the words, "not guilty," my knees almost gave out. I didn't even look at the prosecution. I turned to Rebecca, who just nodded like she'd expected it all along. Daniel was in the back row, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. Walking out of that courthouse was different this time. There were no reporters shouting questions, just applause from strangers lining the steps. I shook hands, I thanked people, but the only thing I could really think about was breathing air that didn't smell like stale carpet and tension. That night, I sat with my parents and Daniel in my mom's kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd eaten breakfast before leaving for my first deployment. My mom cried, Daniel cracked open a beer, and for the first time in nearly a year, I laughed. 2 weeks later, I submitted my resignation from the Army. It wasn't an easy choice. The Army had been my whole adult life, but I couldn't keep wearing the uniform after what had happened. Not because I was ashamed of my service, I wasn't, but because I needed a clean break. I needed to be Ethan Brooks, not Captain Brooks. With my parents' help, I sold the house in Arlington. I didn't want to live in the same neighborhood where every corner had a memory, where I might see Taylor at the grocery store or hear gossip about her and Mark. I moved to Asheville, North Carolina, a place where no one knew me, where the mountains made the air feel cleaner, and where the only uniform I wore was a flannel shirt. The first few months were quiet. I rented a small cabin outside town. I'd wake up to birds instead of alarms, make coffee on the porch, and try to figure out who I was without the Army and without a marriage. It wasn't all smooth. There were nights I woke up sweating, dreams pulling me back to that night, but they came less often. The public recognition didn't disappear entirely. Once in a while, someone in town would glance twice at me, then say, "Hey, aren't you the guy from..." And I'd nod, and they'd say something supportive, and that was it. No judgment. Just acknowledgement. One afternoon, a local veterans group invited me to speak. I told them about the trial, about how betrayal can be worse than combat, about how sometimes the hardest fight is the one you didn't sign up for. It wasn't therapy exactly, but it felt good. Life started to feel normal. I got a part-time job at a hardware store, nothing glamorous, but it kept me busy. I made friends who didn't know the old me, who didn't care about my past beyond the fact that I was honest and showed up when I said I would. One spring morning, I was walking through town when a man stopped me. "You're Brooks, right? The Army guy?" "Yeah," I said, bracing myself. He smiled. "My brother served. He always says you're a reminder that you can stand up for yourself no matter what it costs." I didn't know what to say, so I just shook his hand. That's the thing about freedom. When you finally get it back, it's quieter than you expect. It's not fireworks or parades. It's waking up in the morning and realizing you can do whatever you want, go wherever you want, and no one can stop you. And after everything, that's exactly what I needed. I wasn't Captain Brooks anymore. I wasn't the man on trial. I wasn't the husband betrayed. I was just Ethan. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. Update 3. It's been 2 weeks since that disastrous dinner with her and her so-called new life. You'd think I'd be pacing around my apartment like some heartbroken teenager listening to sad songs on repeat, but nope, I've been too busy and honestly, too relieved. For the first few days after, she tried reaching out, text, calls, even an email with the subject line, "Please, can we talk?" I didn't answer a single one. My friends thought I was being cold, but the truth was, I had already given her too many chances. You can only put your hand on a hot stove so many times before you learn to stop burning yourself. Instead, I threw myself into, well, me. I picked up an early morning gym routine, not for some revenge body nonsense, but because moving weights around felt better than moving memories around in my head. I signed up for a cooking class. Fun fact, I can now make a mean Thai curry. And I even started meeting new people through a hiking group. And here's the kicker. I ran into someone unexpected at one of those hikes. Remember Claire? Yeah, that Claire, the mutual friend who had awkwardly told me about my wife's little friendship with Ryan before everything came crashing down. We hadn't really spoken since the split, but on this hike, she just appeared. At first, I wasn't sure how to act, but she walked up with this big smile and said, "Hey stranger, looks like you're doing better than surviving." And that was it. Conversation flowed like nothing had happened. We ended up hiking side by side the whole day, and by the time we got to the peak, she casually dropped, "You know, I always thought you deserved better. Glad you're finally acting like you believe it too." I didn't read too much into it. Maybe it was just kindness, but it stuck with me. Meanwhile, word somehow got back to me that my ex and Ryan weren't doing so great. Apparently, he wasn't thrilled about how much attention she still tried to put on me. Guess the grass wasn't so green after all. I didn't gloat. Okay, maybe a tiny part of me smirked when I heard, but mostly I just felt free. The biggest shift, though, was internal. I realized I wasn't waking up every day thinking about her anymore. She wasn't the first thing in my mind when I opened my eyes, and she definitely wasn't the last thing on my mind before I went to sleep. That space had been filled with plans, real ones, for myself. So here's where I'm at. I'm not rushing into anything new, but I'm also not hiding from it. Claire and I have texted a few times since the hike, and we might grab coffee soon. I'm not reading into it too much, but it feels nice, easy. And to be totally honest, if my ex showed up tomorrow, begging for another chance, I wouldn't even hesitate to say no. Not because I hate her, I don't, but because I finally remember what it feels like to be okay without her. Update 4. It's strange how time works. 3 years ago, I thought my life had ended. My marriage had crumbled. The betrayal from someone I thought I knew had gutted me. And I honestly believed I'd never get back on my feet. Back then, I woke up every day with that heavy pit in my stomach, the one that makes you wonder if you even want to get out of bed. I remember thinking, maybe this is it. Maybe I'll just stay this way forever, half broken, cynical, and waiting for the clock to run out. But here I am, 3 years later, sipping coffee in a quiet corner cafe that smells like freshly baked croissants. And I feel good. Not just not bad, not just okay. I feel good. My life isn't perfect, but it's mine. And that's something I had to learn to value. The first year after the divorce was all about survival. I threw myself into work, picked up hobbies I'd abandoned during my marriage, and started going to therapy. It wasn't glamorous. Healing never is. But I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't let what happened define me forever. And I didn't. It took time, but somewhere along the way, I stopped checking her social media. I stopped wondering if she regretted what she did. I stopped rehearsing bitter speeches in my head. I realized she could live her life, whatever mess or miracle it turned into, without me caring one bit. Now, I have my own routines. I run every morning, not to punish myself, but because I like the way the air feels in my lungs when I hit that steady stride. I started volunteering at a local community center on weekends, helping teens who don't have a lot of support at home. That one surprised me. I thought I'd be the one giving advice, but half the time, they're the ones teaching me about resilience. Then there's her. Her name's Elena. We met in the most unromantic way possible, standing in line at the DMV. I was there to renew my driver's license. She was there to register her car, and we both got stuck behind a system outage that lasted nearly an hour. I remember making some dumb joke about how the DMV might actually be a government experiment to test human patience. And she laughed. A real laugh. The kind that doesn't sound polite, but genuine. We started talking. One conversation led to another, and before we knew it, we'd both forgotten to be annoyed at the wait. She gave me her number in case I ever needed DMV emotional support again, which made me grin like an idiot. Elena is different. She's warm without being overbearing, curious without being nosy. When I told her, briefly, About my past, she didn't flinch, didn't try to give me advice, didn't ask for details. She just said, everyone's got something they've been through. You're not your past. And she meant it. That's the thing. I don't have to perform for her. I don't have to prove I'm over everything or pretend I'm perfectly healed. She likes me as I am, baggage and all. And in return, I like her for her. Not as a replacement for what I lost, but as someone entirely new. We've been seeing each other for 8 months now. It's slow, steady, and healthy. 3 words I wouldn't have used to describe my old relationship. We cook together sometimes, badly. We go on hikes and pretend we're more outdoorsy than we are. She leaves little notes in my bag before I leave for work, like, have a great day or don't forget you're awesome. They're cheesy, but I keep every single one. Sometimes I think about how scared I was to let someone in again, how convinced I was that love would only lead to pain. But now, I see it differently. Love isn't about erasing the past, it's about building something despite it. If you told me 3 years ago that I'd be here, content, hopeful, even excited about the future, I would have laughed in your face. But life has this quiet way of moving forward, even when you're not paying attention. So yeah, life is better now. Not because I got revenge or proved anyone wrong, but because I chose myself. And in choosing myself, I made room for better people, better experiences, and better love. The past is a chapter I've finally closed. The future, that's still being written. But for the first time in a long time, I'm actually looking forward to reading it.